Welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. My name is Mark, or Mark Your Pages.
And I'm Jess, or Jessie Corinne, and as we talked about in our last episode, this is part 2 of community questions because you guys just had too many questions, too many great questions, so we had to make sure that we got to as many of them as possible. Before we get into it, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts about your 2025 planner lineup. It was really cool to see what you guys are thinking about using or possibly retiring from your lineups. I know that I have a tendency to just kind of add and add and add, so it's always nice to get the reminder to be like, hey, maybe I'll just go down to like one notebook or a handful of notebooks rather than like 2 armfuls of notebooks.
Well, Jess, let's go ahead and get right into the questions. I'm going to pick the first one. This is like brass tacks. We're getting to the drama early. We're not even going to tease this one here. This is a question that says, I know you both have your favorite notebook brands, but has there ever been one that you've decided never to use ever again?
Yes. Oh dear. I think that I literally a couple months ago, I think possibly 1 or 2, had a video go up on the channel about like 5 notebooks that I just did not like, and then 3 that I actually really enjoyed. That one was specifically for memberships though, because I don't need to spread my negativity around to everybody. But yes, there have been some that I've decided I shan't be using again. But also like I also feel like there are uses for pretty much any notebook. So for instance, like LT 1917s, I know that they're not great for my everyday journal, but I wouldn't not use them again. If I found a specific use where I just wanted like black ink on paper and I didn't mind the ghosting and stuff, then like sure, I'd use them. For everyday journaling, no. That's not going to be one for me. One in particular that didn't vibe so well was actually a Typhosi notebook, which is interesting because they're kind of fast becoming one of my kind of preferred brands. But this particular notebook they had, and I think you know the one, was so smudgy. I don't know what the paper was coated with, but nothing would dry on it. Not all of their notebooks are like that. It was just this one particular one they came out with, but that notebook definitely would not be one that I would use in the everyday. What do you think, Mark? What about your not preferred notebooks?
Yeah, so that is one that came to mind, was that one. I haven't tried any of the newer ones, and you actually told me that it has changed from that because we had a lot of long conversations about it. I was like, oh my goodness. That was just like, you had to work so hard. I was putting like smudge paper between every page. Like, this is not working out for me. I would say just like cheap notebooks. Early on in my bullet journaling life, I was grabbing just notebooks from Michael's or the craft store or wherever it was because they were like a dime a dozen. And at that point, I didn't know anything about paper quality. I didn't know anything about brands. Literally, after a month of using it, it was falling out of the binding and it was horrible. And now that I have much nicer notebooks, I just know that I'll never go back to using crap. And no offense if that's the journal that you use. I'm just saying, like, for me, it didn't work out too well. I'm sorry. A little harsh there with my response on that one.
Yeah, wow, really coming out shots fired here. But it's funny because like one of my favorite notebooks is a cheap notebook. It's this like little kind of like soft spiral notebook or whatever. It's supposed to be good for people who are left-handed. I mean, not me, but like I find it just very enjoyable to write in. But I think it's because it's cheap that I feel like I can just be very free and messy and scrappy with it. And I only ever use it for like jotting down things, kind of like, you know, mentally processing thoughts and stuff, trying to work out what I want in my planner. If I'm doing a planner setup and stuff, I'll start in the scrappy notebook so that then it doesn't feel like I'm kind of quote wasting the pages of my nicer notebook.
Yeah.
Keeping on the topic of supplies, though, and notebooks that we would or wouldn't use, would you ever consider using a Hobonichi? This person in particular was thinking about supplementing their journal lineup with that one.
Yeah. So I did use a Hobonichi once. It was an undated one. It was a Techo, I believe. I think when I did my review, I called it a Techno because I thought it sounded super cool, but they were like, it's called a Techo.
I think it's called a Techo.
A Techo? Okay, yeah. So I can't pronounce the words, and I kind of liked it, but it was undated, and I think everyone who has them uses like a dated version of it, and I really like that. I've used the Night Owl planners, which are somewhat similar, but more like US based, you know, like I don't know, just it works with the time that I do. I don't like the military timing and schedules because that's not how I use time. So if it's like 12, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus 13, 14, 15, 16, I don't like that. I like it more basic how I like to use it. I also just think that there are so many different versions of it and you can really make it your own. In last episode, someone asked about like customizing their planners or their journals and making it their own. I think that's a really great way to do that. You can buy the different covers for it. You can buy the lineup or the layout of it that you like and works best for you and try different things. So I definitely would if I found the right one, but I would have to get over the ghosting. They're just very thin but good paper, and I don't know. I do it again every time I say ghost. I have like a reaction. My body is just like, oh, you don't like it. Stop saying that you're gonna do it. You don't like it, and I just it's weird. I'm noticing now that after 2 episodes of doing it, every time I talk about ghosting, I literally it's like a ghost is in the room. I get chills.
Is the ghosting in the room with us?
It is. It's on the journals I'll never use ever again.
I've been very interested in the Hobonichi kind of like series. I don't know what they call it. Lineup range. There's the word. But I don't think that I would personally use it. I have been so super curious, like so very tempted to get one and try it out. And especially because you see like the Hobonichi creators online with their very like pretty small handwriting with their very very black ink pens, and they put their little stickers on, but like only little ones because you don't want to bulk it up too much. Oh, it's very very cute, but it's also, I know, not the way that I plan. Like I like to have the flexibility of a blank notebook with dots, not fully blank. Come on, can't write in a straight line to save myself. But I don't think that the style of the planner would actually work for how I like to plan. I also know that, like you, ghosting is not my not my friend. While I do like ghosting when you're just doing black ink on paper, which is probably what I would do with a Hobonichi, I don't use that often enough to really warrant getting one for myself. But I do like the idea of supplementing your lineup with a pre-printed planner. I think that idea in general can totally get behind. I have every so often thought about possibly how I could use a pre-printed planner in my lineup. It wouldn't be for my everyday journal, but I don't really have like an immediate need for anything that I would use it for. So it's kind of like a curiosity point that I don't really need to use right now because my journaling purpose doesn't really align with.
Absolutely. This next question, Jess, actually reminded me of the last episode we had because you talked about your 2025 lineup and your R&D journals and all of this. And I saw this question. I was like, we have to ask this one because I'm sure people watch your videos of 100 different ways to do a thing. I watch your videos of 100 different ways. And I say to myself, like, how in the world do you create all of these different ideas? This question specifically, and I'm going to join my question with their question, is how do you have time for all of the spreads in journaling? And how in the hell do you come up with 100 different ideas for something ever?
Well, the easy answer is I don't sleep. Very much when I was like still a teacher and stuff. And people are like, how do you find the time to do all of this kind of stuff? And I'm just like, I don't prioritize my self-care. That's how I do it. Do not do what I do. Now that I do work for myself though, and I have a little bit more flexibility in terms of how I schedule my time, I try and restrain myself to waking hours or typical waking hours for doing journaling content. And I'm slowly getting better at not working in the evenings, though we are in the lead up to the end of year. So I know that that's not going to hold. Like there are going to be evenings that I'm working on them. But as was mentioned, this is my job. You know, I I work for myself as a content creator who makes journaling content. So my days are very much filled, especially around the periods where I'm making those very big idea videos. They're just filled with me sitting at my desk making layout after layout after layout. So the way that I am able to use my time in that kind of like lends itself to being able to make as many pages as I do. Not necessarily something that everybody has time for though. I can understand that. When I was a teacher, it was very much like just using any available time in my evenings that wasn't spent doing teacher related stuff, doing stuff for the channel, making content and things like that, neglecting my well-being. Not a good time. Nowadays, if I were doing it not as a job, if I was still teaching, I wouldn't be a content creator anymore. That was kind of the ultimatum, all the tomato that I gave myself. It's like, okay, you're gonna do one because you can't do both and do both of them to the level that you really want to do them at. So it's like, okay, if it's gonna be teaching versus content creating, which one's gonna win out? I'm like, I'm gonna give it a shot. I can always go back to teaching if I wanted to, but it's like you're kind of on you built the train up. You've got some momentum with this content creating gig that you're just going to see how that rides out, and still riding the train. So that's good. Let's knock on wood and make sure that keeps happening.
Yeah, I can't imagine in a planner world without you in it. I'm not just saying that to blow smoke. Like, I really mean that. You're such a part of it. You're this cornerstone of just creativity and good vibes and like community and all of that. I'm glad you chose content creation and it's working out for you, because I would be real sad if you chose teaching over this, just because you have so many amazing ideas. And I know exactly what you mean about how you use that time, because I'm on the opposite end of this, where this is a hobby for me that feels like a second job. And my advice is, how do you have time? Is that you actually time block and you make the time you want for it. It's like a hobby for me. So if I played golf on a regular basis, I would make the time and block that time out to go and do that thing. Or if I liked movies, I would block out that time to go watch a new movie. That's how I do it with my planner creation. I do it before work. Sometimes if I have time over lunch, I might record a video or do a thing. Or if we're just sitting around in the evenings watching TV, I have another notebook I use for just ideas. I'm just sketching out different things. So it's about finding the time and time that you want to use for something that you enjoy. If you really like it, you'll make time for it. That's how I look at it.
No, I completely agree with that. I know that one of the videos we shared on the channel a little while ago was a flip through of my friend's reading journal setup, because she does excellent things in her reading journal. And one of the comments that came up was like, "Oh, well, she obviously like doesn't have a life because this is all she must do with her time." And it's like, "No, this is her primary hobby. Like, reading and reading journaling is something that is important to her and that she values. So she makes time in her day, sets aside time in her day to do those things." Now, if we're thinking about journaling in general, trying to make time for that and all of that kind of thing, you don't necessarily have to make as much time for it as I do. Because, as said, I'm out here making like 100 layout idea videos and stuff on a semi regular basis. You do not need to have the 6, 7, or whatever hours a day that I dedicate to my craft. But finding some kind of pockets of time in amongst your schedule, they don't have to be all at once as well. Sprinkle them throughout your day, do a 5 minute here and there. It all adds up, and you'll be going to be able to do a lot of different things in your journal that you might not otherwise have thought you could. On your question of like how I come up with ideas, is literally like a lot of me sitting here just racking my brain, being like, what else is there?
I see it as just like a big brainstorming session. It'd be the same thing like what I do at work when we're trying to think up a new feature for a product that we're building. It's just you're throwing ideas out there, thinking about how you use it, using a lot of that same mental methodology on coming up with ideas and things like that. So I half joke asking that question. I had a hard time. I put out a video a week or two ago with like 3 vertical weekly ideas, and I had a really hard time being like, are these different enough to even validate making a video with them combined? And when I see your videos of like 35 different ways to do this, I was just like, damn, like it's amazing. I don't mean it in a negative way when I say like, how do you do it? I'm just always just like, damn, that's awesome that you can generate that many ideas and execute on them too.
Yeah, I think it also comes from just like living in the journaling space as much as I do, because like a lot of the content that I'm consuming online, whether that be like YouTube, Instagram, whatever else, that's journaling related. I also take a very kind of like problem solution approach to it. So it's like, okay, well, if this is the kind of like area of life that people are trying to make journaling layouts around, then what kind of reasons would they have for setting up layouts? What kind of like issues are they trying to solve? What kind of things are they trying to capture in terms of information? And how can we set that up in terms of different layout ideas? It's a fun, like, kind of problem solving game. Keeping on the kind of content creation or train of things, one question we had is, how do you keep motivated to create content?
I think for me, it's about finding the fun in it. So, as someone who's creating content and sharing it, I see them as two different things too. Like, if you're keeping your bullet journal for yourself and using it versus what you and I are doing and others are creating content and then sharing that. I think for me, it's about finding what's fun about it. I think the reason that I've been able to keep up with it is because the content I'm creating, the bullet journal I'm creating, my weekly spreads, I'm using that for work. So there's an immediate use for it. I'm literally creating it to use it right away versus just in my other journals just for ideas. It's kind of a sketch of an idea of something I might use in the future. I think that's one way to do it. I think if you're also using it as just content creation and you're out there, is finding new ways to do it. As many people hated reels and creating those and like trying to jump on that train, I friggin' love it. I think that's so fun. I think it's so creative. Like, I love nothing more than like finding a funny sound that I found someone else that's not in the journal community and being like, ooh, okay, how can I take that and use that for our space, right? And that to me, it's actually very similar, kind of like your idea generation for your planner things, where I'm using my brain a bit differently, where I'm like, okay, here's a thing or an idea or a trend. Now, how do I make this work for planning bullet journal stationery? And luckily, we fit into a lot of stereotypes in this community and we all do it. So it's easy to talk about spending your money on things you don't want, getting another notebook, buying another pen, whatever that might be, or just sharing things that you love. I love talking about exciting things that I'm buying for myself, new pens, new ink, getting a box of stationery or a subscription box. It's always just fun to do. So do what excites you and keep having fun with it, and then make sure that you're doing it for yourself, even if you're sharing with other people as well.
Yeah, I think that having some kind of like purpose or reason to come back to is probably what kept me going at the start. Because for me, with starting content creation, like, before making it my job and before I was even making any money off it or anything like that, it was just I have ideas and I want to give them to other people. Like, I want to help other people with their journaling because I have so many ideas for journaling. But I think that, like, not necessarily saying that you're creating in the journaling space or like creating in whichever space you're creating in. It's like, what is your reason for creating it? Is it so that you have a creative outlet? Because then you can really just lean into that. It's not about the numbers and the followers and all of that kind of thing. It's you being able to expend your creative energy. If it gets to a point where, like me, it's like, I create so I can continue to put food on the table. It's a little bit different. I mean, there's also obviously the other aspect of it that it's just something I enjoy. It's something that I like, enjoy getting to create the layouts and connect with our community and all of that kind of thing. My big purpose being like, I have ideas and I want to share them and I want to help other people. Like, there are other ways to do that as well outside of creating content, but because I enjoy it so much, that's kind of like what I guess helps push me forward with it.
Let's keep on this same train. There's another great question from someone who asked about how we learn to record and edit audio and video for YouTube.
Trial and error. It's a really unsophisticated answer. Practice. Oh, we love that one. But honestly, that's kind of what it is. Like, the first videos you make suck. Like, it's just what it is. Like, we talked about it in the last episode, but Jess's little rabbit noises of at the end of every sentence, which is so grating. Like, you make the video, you pick it apart politely, and then you do better in the next one. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, so we've kind of come up with our own editing styles and all of this. But if you actually want to like learn how to do it, there's a lot of really great low risk ways to do that. One of them is YouTube. Literally just take the editing software you're going to be using, like once you've found what you want to use, and then just do like, iMovie Maker for beginners, or like whatever, Filmora for beginners, Adobe Premiere Pro for beginners. Like, any of those introductory videos will set you up in the right direction.
Yeah, I would say for me, I have a background in audio production. So I worked in radio before I started my entire career inside of design. So I was a radio DJ on there doing that. And as a part of that job, you also have to edit and record audio for the commercials as well. So I already was used to that. And then while I was doing radio, because you don't make a lot of money in radio, I was also working at a nightclub. And in the nightclub, they had a lot of AV all around. And I used to work there during the day, and I used to cut up videos for us to use in the nightclub at night, and then also for TV commercials. So that was my first way to kind of get my hands in and using that type of equipment and doing that type of thing. It wasn't educated and like actually taught. I taught myself and had someone else teach me. But it's funny because then it was like all these years later that I hadn't done that skill, and so much has changed. I mean, it changes like every year, like something new comes out. But when I started recording content for YouTube and for Instagram and all of that for bullet journaling planning, I just used my phone. And for the first 2 years, I recorded and I edited on my phone. No extra anything. I think I used InShot. I bought the premium version of that, which is like a one-time cost. And I've been using it ever since. That's what I use for my reels and other things I do on my phone. But I just use that, and you just kind of learn and you watch videos on how to do different things, especially like lighting. Like this took me a really, like, look back at my old videos. It is atrocious. I used to have a glow light and like and like a cardboard box thing in the back of my videos. Go back that far when I first started and you will see it and you will, oh, it's horrible. But that's what you do. And just like Jess just said, You watch that and you're like, okay, how do I improve my lighting? And you watch videos on how to do that. And then you go, okay, I'm ready to upgrade my camera. I'm going to go from my phone to an actual camera. What's the easiest camera to use? But honestly, I mean, your phone, the newer phones, sometimes better quality than anything else. It's kind of insane. So it's pretty awesome the way that you can make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I used my phone for video recording for at least the first like 4 years or something of making content. I think I didn't change over to a proper camera until I was literally full-time content creating. I'm pretty sure I got a proper microphone about a year into the piece because I told myself like, no, you have to prove to yourself that you're actually going to stick with this. You're actually going to keep going with it. Get your reps in before you change, like go and spend the money, I suppose, to change over your microphone. But good audio is usually more important than good video. That's a big piece of advice. You don't want it sounding like you're like underwater and nobody can hear you anymore. Nobody wants to listen to that. Ugh. Keeping on the content creating train, because we got a lot of questions about that, which like I low-key love talking about it, so I'm like all for it. But this one was, what advice can you give to someone who just created an Instagram account to share their Bujo creations online?
So the best advice I'm going to give you is learn how to take good shots of your journal with your phone. That will involve a little bit of lighting. There's different ways. I know a lot of people just use natural lighting, but the problem is you then have to rely on nature to give you that good light. I remember years ago, someone was like, I can't take any pictures because it's been raining here for 3 weeks. And I was like, ew, like you rely on real nature? You can do really easy stuff with just like a ring light down on top of your journal and get something like, honestly, your phone can do good photo editing now. AI can do like really quick like lighting hacks for you to kind of make it look nice. I think hands down, best thing you can ever do is just learn how to take a good photo of your journal to share it online, and that will make such a difference in how you do it.
I think that if you do want to use natural lighting, having a setup that is mobile is really useful. So I literally had a shelf that was from an old, like, I don't know, set of shelves that we had, like an old bookcase. And I would do that as my thing so that I could take it around to the parts of my house that had the best lighting at the time. I'd like prop it up against the window so that I could get the natural light, or like bring it into the lounge room or whatever. Having a mobile system very much helped with that. Also, if you're going to do some kind of like photo editing or whatnot, and you want a good app for it, Snapseed is a really good one. It's free. You can like up the contrast, brighten things up. The best part about it though is that you can like select by color, which means that if your pages end up looking like really yellow or like really blue, depending on the lighting, you can literally specifically select that color on the picture and desaturate it or brighten that or whatever. And that's the ones that people often use when they're sharing their photos, because we all know that the stuff that people share online isn't 100% real. But when it comes to those kind of like still images and stuff where it's like, ooh, the blackout notebook looks so dark and like the contrast is popping. Yeah, it's probably edited or it's got a filter or something. Like, play around with them, find the style that you like. Snapseed is a really good app though if you just want to like up contrast and brightness and things like that.
And as a person who is colorblind and can't see the difference between if your page looks a little bit more bluish or yellow or whatever, I also use that. I couldn't think of it when I was mentioning the other apps before, but that's one. As soon as I found that one, I haven't used anything else, honestly. I mean, yes, your phone can automatically clean things up for you, but that's one where you have a little bit more control, and there's already pre-done filters in there too that you can use. I can't say enough about it. All right, Jess, let's get into a fun one. This is about planning, but the question is, what do you do while you're working inside of your planner? Are you watching TV, listening to music? And if you are, what are you watching or listening to?
Nice. Because I set up as many layouts as I do, and I often need to film them when I'm setting them up, it means that I can't necessarily do a lot of stuff that like causes me to pause too much. So I find that things that are like heavy on the audio are usually good. I mean, like I could totally watch something that gets me to pause, but the process would take way too long, and then I'd have to edit out all of these parts with my hands. It's just like, right? We want something that makes future Jess's life a little easier. So previously I was watching things like Gilmore Girls because they talk at 100 miles a minute, which means that you don't actually have to watch because they're describing in full what's going on. that works really well. Also, any kind of like true crime thing, because oftentimes, provided it's in your first language, it's pretty easy to know what's going on without actually having to watch the screen. And more recently, I've actually been getting into audiobooks because previously I didn't have good access to them. And now I've actually been able to kind of like broaden my horizons in terms of reading and listening to some audiobooks while I do my work. What about you, Mark?
So I have to keep it very musical because if I listen to a book, I can't write in a journal and also comprehend what's happening there too. It's also why I can't watch a new movie while I'm doing something else as well. Also, I have a really bad habit for some reason with audiobooks and TV or movie is as I'm writing my own sentence, I'm getting the information and then I start writing what I'm hearing on my page, but it doesn't happen with music. So I can listen to music and my music is very diverse. It's mostly very upbeat rap, pop, kind of rock, whatever I'm into at that exact moment. I will listen to it ad nauseum and I'm dancing, I'm moving, I'm having fun. It just adds to the enjoyment in my space. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I find that any kind of music with lyrics for me, if I'm trying to actually write something out, doesn't work because exactly like you said, I'll just start writing lyrics instead of writing what I was supposed to be writing down. So I've found that some people do lo-fi and lo-fi's fine, but I find that hip hop lo-fi is best. Like that's what I've really enjoyed when it comes to like no lyrics but still music and still kind of upbeat.
I have tried non-musical. Someone told me about brown noise, which just sounds disgusting every time I say it.
I love brown noise. It's really good.
Oh my gosh, it literally has changed my life. Like when I want to focus, that just like I feel it. I don't know if this happens to you. I think everyone has a different reaction. I feel it in my shoulders. Like I literally feel like this weight on me, and it's like a weighted blanket of noise. I know it sounds so weird, but if you've never listened to brown noise, it is amazing. I know some people use it to fall asleep. So someone I work with was telling me that they use brown noise for productivity. And I was talking about it to someone else. They were like, oh, I can't listen. I'd fall asleep. That's what I use to fall asleep. But I'm telling you, focus, especially this brain, always something's happening in here. That's another good one when you just want to be like, laser focused.
I love the idea of like the different noise colors as well, because white noise sounds like really tinny. Green noise is pretty good, but brown and pink noise are probably my favorite noises of the noise, like color noise.
I also do that when I'm reading on my tablet. It also helps me drown on other stuff as well because I have like the opposite effect that when I'm reading, I can't have other stuff also happening, like I said, because I need to focus. And the brown noise reminds me of like the ocean. So like if I'm sitting outside and I'm listening to it and I can read, I comprehend so much more of what I'm reading. All these, I wish I would have known that when I was younger because it would have helped me a lot more in school, I feel like.
My favorite thing for reading rather than journaling is like those 12-hour ambiance tracks that you get, the ones that are like, reading room with a crackling fireplace in a thunderstorm or whatever. It feels like one of those like keyword stuffed titles, but a lot of those, they're really, really good. I was totally just listening to one last night. I was like sitting over in my reading chair, had the fireplace going on my computer screen. It was quite nice.
Before I found brown noise for focus, I used to turn on a cafe one and you could control the coffee ambiance and you could control the coffee people chatter ambiance. So you could really figure out what you wanted. But then I found brown noise and I haven't gone back since.
So we had a couple of questions about this topic, so I figured we should probably slip this one in here. But how do you find motivation to work with your journal every day? I guess probably a better question is, do you find motivation to work with your journal every day?
Yeah, because it is literally how I get my work done. So I was just talking to my barber about this the other day. He was asking me about like the social media stuff and all of that. And we got into this conversation about adult ADHD. And he was saying how, he was diagnosed younger with it. And I've never been officially diagnosed, but I know. And he was saying that it is something that we move from different topics, right? This hyper focusing on things and then never using things again. Bullet journaling is the only thing in my entire life, literally, that I've stuck with for as long as I have. Video games, music changes all the time. The pen I like to use changes on a weekly basis. Bullet journaling is the only thing for me that has worked for as long as I've been doing it. It works. I don't have to go look for anything else, even though I do all the time because my brain's like, Mark, you want something different in your life. And I'm like, nope, this really does its job for me. So that's really, I don't have to find motivation to use it because I know that it works for me. I think the motivation maybe is more about like the excitement about the pen, the stamp, the sticker, the whatever I'm into at that time, just bringing that into my journal because I find that that makes me more excited to use it, but I'm using it no matter what to get my job done. So that's my approach. How about you?
You know, I feel you on that because, in terms of, I know hobbies, if we think about hobbies specifically, bullet journaling is the longest standing hobby that I have had because it did kind of start as that way to be a little bit more creative, have a creative outlet that also helped me kind of like organize my life. So that has been a very big motivator. And because I've stuck with it as long as I have, it means that it now has the track record that I know that it works. So, you know, if I'm ever feeling a little bit slumpy with my journal, like I was hardcore slumping in both February and March of this year, but stuck with it because I know that it has worked for me. I've come out of those slumps before. I've still gotten a lot of value out of the process, so I stick with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I actually touch my journal every day. Like there are going to be some days where I like have other things going on. Life is hectic. Maybe I'm traveling. I don't see my journal as like being this thing that I have to get in with every day. I just tend to get in with it every day. Like there's a reason that I call my bullet journal my everyday journal, and it's because it usually gets everyday use. That's because it's how I organize my life and stuff. But there are still going to be some days where like I don't touch it. Like anytime I go on a trip, I usually don't end up touching it really at all. I take it with me because it feels more comfortable to have it there. But oftentimes, like if I'm gone for a 6-day trip, 4 out of those 6 days, I won't touch it at all. And it'll only be in the last 2 that I'm like, alrighty, we want to hit the ground running when we get back. What do we need to like think about and prepare for and all of that kind of stuff. But I feel like if you go into either bullet journaling or planning or something with this kind of expectation that you have to use it every single day, then when you get to the days that you don't, it will feel like a shortcoming on your own part. And that I don't think that your journal should ever make you feel less about yourself. Like that's not a happy place to be in. So I don't give it that kind of expectation of like, you must touch this every single day, otherwise you're not a real bullet journal. You're a fraud kind of a thing. We don't want that.
All right, Jess, this is something that I'm going to manifest out into the world for you because I think we all need this at some point. If you had the possibility of making a seasonal collection or just a collection as a whole with Archer and Olive, what do you think you would make it?
I have 2 ideas. First one would be that it would be like science related. So we're thinking like conical flasks, beakers, test tubes, round bottom flasks kind of things. Maybe like, I don't know, DNA double helix kind of stuff, like, I don't know, physics symbols or whatever. That would be kind of fun. That would be kind of cool. Maybe like, you know, chemical symbol for caffeine and stuff because everybody loves a coffee except for me. By the sounds of things, whatever. I mean, there's caffeine in Coke Zero. It counts. So that would be one idea, very kind of like sciencey based. And then the other idea would be like epic fantasy based. So I'm thinking like, I know your travel pack and maps and like swords and dragons and that kind of stuff. Like that would be a really cool collection. I mean, we all know that you already had a collection with Archer and Olive. Would you do anything differently if you were to do it again, or?
I'm not going to lie to you, Jess. I've thought about this a lot because I had such a good experience doing that with them. The thought of doing that again makes me really excited. I would bring back all the special features of my journal, like the smart marks and some of those other pieces I put in there. I would probably just refine it a little bit. I would make the page numbers a little bit darker. I felt like they were a little bit light, but you know, I didn't want to make anyone super mad, but still make it helpful. But the cover, I would love to design another cover. It was so much fun coming up with that. And I did a video when I talked about that, where I talked about all my other ideas. Like I have a lot of other ideas that I would love to execute for a different journal like that. Maybe some like Bauhaus or something a little bit closer to that. I think my design was close to that, but not 100%. I would just like to do more with it. So that's how I would roll, I think.
I'd be keen to see it. I've been thinking about how I'm going to use my marked notebook, and because of the page numbers, I was considering using it for my like long-term collections journal, maybe, because that one's one where I do usually go and number the pages anyway, because things aren't necessarily in chronological order. To be seen. I make no promises, but that is what I'm currently considering. Alrighty, next question was, what is the number one feature of your current bullet journal that helps you with your productivity?
Ooh. Mine's gonna be real simple. It's having my task and my notes just together on one page. So I kind of do a bit of daily logging, I guess, but it's for a weekly view. I don't write down each and every single date and then have my task and my notes for that. I have a section of my weekly that is all for tasks. And I just do like a running task list on anything I have to get done. And then I have a separate notes section where I write down notes for my meetings and whatnot. Sometimes tasks will show up there and I'll integrate them in. But having a separate space for each of those is what helps me the most get those things done. And then I will say my index is helpful from a productivity standpoint, kind of efficiency, because if I need to find that information, again, specifically if it's a note on a page that's a weekly, I'll write that inside of my index so I can find it again quickly versus like trying to remember where that was, because this brain doesn't hold on to that type of information. How about yourself? What's yours?
Sadly saying it, it's literally just daily logs. Like, I love my daily logs. It's literally just my first drop point for any kind of information. It's where I go to get all of my tasks done and stuff. But if we're going to embellish on that, make it a little bit more fancy, then I would probably say it would be priority indicators, which are effectively like little signifiers that I might use beside a particular entry in the daily log, just to kind of highlight it as saying like, hey, this is the thing that needs to get done first. It kind of just helps me like hone my focus in on that one thing. So it's like when I'm glancing at the list, hey, this one has like a bright yellow dot next to it. It's kind of important. We should probably start there. I think that just having that kind of like set aside as like priority, important, highlight for the day just really helps me get the most out of my daily log without getting kind of like lost in the weeds of anything and everything that might end up on there.
That's a really interesting one. I've found that I've kind of dumbed mine down a lot where I'm just putting like an exclamation point now. If I know it has to be really important to get done, I used to try to do like, a little eyeball or like a little screen. If it was like, look at this website or do this thing. Now I just put an exclamation point or grab a highlighter and be like, you need to remember this. And then I make it happen.
Yeah, I find that the color helps it make like kind of stand out a little bit more, because I don't typically tend to use a lot of color on my layouts outside of like the theme. So, we've got the second line highlights and stuff that are just there for readability, or like, the colored elements as part of the theme itself in terms of like titles and decoration or whatever. So if I pick something that's like theme adjacent, so it doesn't stand out too much and look like, hideous, who let this guy in? It still just helps me kind of like draw my attention to it. Also, I use exclamation points for notes rather than a dash. So I'm like out here doing rogue things with the bullet journal key.
It's interesting. You're out there breaking rules, Jess. I got to tell you, it makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm excited about it. And I'm glad it works for you. I think that's the most important part of this. So, such a good question. Let's ask the audience this question this week, which is, what is your most productive spread or thing that you do inside of your bullet journal or your planner that just keeps you moving, keeps you on top of things? Drop that in the comments for us. You can leave it as a note for the podcast if you want. Or, of course, you can always email us, plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com. Or you can also drop a comment on the little show picture we have on our Instagram at Planner Pals Podcast as well.
I'm really eager to hear everybody's thoughts about that one, because I'm always looking for other ways to bring like more productivity into my productivity system. And we did try and get to as many questions as we could in both this episode and last. So if we didn't quite get to your question, we do apologize. We're going to have to do another one of these because you guys have so many good things that you want to know from us and about the community in general. If you do have any more questions, leave them in the comments. We'll try and get to them as best we can. But otherwise, Mark, what are we going to be talking about next week?
In our next episode, we're actually going to be talking more about productivity and productivity methods. I know, Jess, this is a topic that's true and dear to your heart. You have a lot of great things teed up for that. I cannot wait to talk about those, because I have a handful as well that just have helped me throughout the years too, that I use inside of my planner and bullet journal. So when we come back to you next time, Planner Pals will be talking all about that. Until then, thanks for hanging out with us today.